All right, so this is Ian. If you have his prompt, this is the speech you're supposed to be responding to.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Ian Hale. Howdy. The claim that I am responding to, it wasn't very structured and organized well, and it didn't really have a specific claim of fact. So what I did is I took out what I believe was her claim of fact, which is drilling for oil in the Arctic Natural Wildlife Reserve would endanger the habitat of the animals that live there. The secondary claims would, one, it would harm the animals, and two, the oil would not be worth the damage that they're doing. The first claim, which is harming the animals. There was very little citation for the arguments that she presented on the first claim, specifically how the animals need this particular area and why they couldn't just move to a slightly farther away area in this natural wildlife reserve. The reserve is is actually 19 I think million miles, and then they're only using 1.5 million miles of it for the drilling. So there's a lot of space around the reserve for the animals to go to, and there was no source citation for what kind of harm that the drilling does to the animals. If it's substantial, if it's even really an issue. And there was no proof. Same thing. No proof that it was harmful. And I did some research, and there's a company called EDF, which does field testing on all areas that do drilling for oil. And the whole point of what they do is to make sure that the environment isn't being harmed. And they do everything from air quality tests, noise, lighting, water, waste, pits and impoundments, and air emissions. So they do a lot of tests to make sure that what they're doing doesn't have that impact on the environment. And you can look that up on their website, edfsystems.org. Let's see, and the second claim, which was it would not be worth the hassle. It doesn't really support the main issue of directly harming the animals or protecting the animals. It's more of it's almost a completely different claim on its own, claim of fact. Although valid points are raised about people switching to hybrid cars and things like that, it doesn't really have any correlation to harming the animals from drilling. So I couldn't find any connection between the two, and there's reason to believe that the drilling is done within a reasonable amount of effect on the area that they're performing these operations on. So that is my conclusion. Thank you very much.
All right, Ian, I thought that you did a good job at the beginning trying to clarify what the proposition meant, at least as you thought it was presented. You believe there was some ambiguity in that claim. It would be interesting for us to put up the claim of fact and listen to it and then immediately follow with your response to see if in fact there was that ambiguity that you're talking about. I don't remember that there was that big a problem, but I thought that you summarized the issue very clearly and what the secondary claims were, so that helps structurally. You challenged the advocate's evidence at the beginning, saying there's a lack of evidence on what these risks are. And you basically suggested that there wasn't any sourcing. Okay, so there were claims being made and no evidence being provided. So there's an absence of any illustration. Was there any statistical data to reach this conclusion? Did they cite any authoritative information? I think that's a good way to maybe make that kind of argument. Don't just say they don't have any sourcing. Point out.
Okay.
You know,
Specific.
yeah. They provided no example of an animal that was hurt. They didn't mention a specific species or give us any statistical information that suggested in other places where they've done drilling that there's been this consequence.
Yeah.
There's no authority who has reached this conclusion. Well, if there is an authority, they didn't identify who it was. We've got a claim here that says it's going to have some harm, but as far as I can tell, it's just the claim of the advocate as opposed to somebody who has studied this particular place. And then you can present your counter evidence, I think, a little bit more effectively in contrast to that.
I think I was driven away from that because I couldn't find any, like, I was looking for direct, like, evidence, like, on the opposition of
Yeah.
it, and it
Well,
really drove me away.
sometimes you're going to find that, but you won't always find that. And you really have to look at the advocate's argument then, because that seems like where you started. You said the advocate didn't present any evidence. Even if you didn't have any evidence, you should be able to point out that there are no examples of any animals hurt. There's no authority cited by the advocate. We don't have any statistical information on this. We have a vague claim that says that the animals are disrupted or their lifestyles are affected. And that's it. And we don't even know how harmful that is. So if 20 caribou have to move their home, how big an impact does that have on the caribou population or the natural environment there? Well, the advocate never said. They never said that it would cause the population to decrease by any percentage. They didn't tell us what the land area is that would ultimately be affected. You need to do the same sort of thing, though, when you're presenting your evidence, because you're presenting some information about the land area that's going on there, and you begin to minimize it. There's 19 million square acres or miles of territory in the Alaska National Wilderness Reserve. It's only believed that there are maybe 1.5 million of those acres that might have oil under in it that people want to develop. And by the way, I think if you look on this, because I've heard this argument for 20 years, I've been hearing those kinds of things, you would find that the people who are talking about developing it suggest that you don't have to chew up 1.5 million acres in order to do this, because the actual acreage where the plants would be working in the drilling is like really small.
I was trying to I spent like an hour looking for specifically what the size of the drilling operation. Couldn't find anything. It's just,
Well, I don't know where you went, but I can tell you, the most frequent number I've heard is 1,200 acres. The oil companies are saying, we need 1,200 acres to be able to access this, not 1.5 million, not 19 million. It's, the footprint of the drilling operation would be very small. And they're like I said, there are a lot of advocates on it. I don't want to challenge your research skills on this, but I do think that there's information here that you could use on that. You cited this EVF study that was done here. See, what was a little bit odd about that was you tell us about EVF, you tell us what they do, and then you don't tell us what they found. You really didn't say what their conclusion was about what drilling would be in this area. And then you tell us, the only thing you tell us is you can go on their website and find out. That's why you're making the argument. You're the one who went on the website. You're the one who should have said, according to EVF, which is an expert in doing these kinds of this kind of research, the impact on the population of the caribou would be minimal. The amount of land area would be infinitesimally small in comparison. The likelihood that there'd be oil spills or damage or anything that is nearly non-existent. Give me a a quote from EVF that tells us what's going on there. That's what you need to do when you're citing your evidence. I like the arguments that you made, challenging a couple of the reasoning points of the advocate, saying, look, there's no follow-through. They raise the specter of some harm, but we don't have any idea about how significant that harm is, and how do we measure that. The challenge to alternative energies, for instance, and whether or not we need the oil here. I think alternative energies are great. The idea of not having to rely on all the fossil fuel in the world to do everything would be wonderful, but we've been, the idea that that's going to prevent us from needing fossil fuels for a period of time, that's going to happen overnight, that's the problem. We'd like to be able to get all those things, but technology takes time, and it's not always cost competitive, and we need to have these sorts of things. So I think there are arguments there that you could make that would be a little bit more forceful. Like I said, I thought you did a good job structuring things for the most part. Your presentation, I think it's a little hesitant at times. You sound sometimes like you're a little uncertain. At the beginning, you acknowledge that you're uncertain what the claims are, but you need to be a little bit more forceful with your arguments. Like I said, don't be shy about making a declarative statement and saying, the advocate provided no evidence for this. EVF says this is in fact not the case. Alternative energies will help us 100 years from now, but for the next 100 years we're going to need oil. You need to make more affirmative claims and not seem like you're being passive and defensive in the argument. All right, thank you.